Hey, and welcome to the Joie Miller Podcast. I'm so excited for you to join us today. I have a special guest. My amazing husband, Pastor Nathan Miller, is here with us today. One of the biggest questions that I got when I threw out podcast episode ideas was talking about biblical marriage, stress in marriage, just marriage in general. So I thought, what a great opportunity to have a most handsome guest on the podcast.
Yeah.
So today we are going to kick things off. It's the holiday season. We're going to be discussing the top stresses that married couples face around the holidays. So this should be a lot of fun to talk about.
Yeah. So, hey, first off, thanks for having me today. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah.
It's good to be here. And I'm excited to jump into this topic with you. There's a lot of stress around this time of year.
A lot of stress around holidays. In fact, when we do premarital counseling, one of the questions that we ask the couples is, how do you holiday? What do holidays look like with your families? And they kind of look confused, like, why are we talking about this? It's because holidays can create a lot of ripples for married couples. And so, even if you've been dating for a while and you feel like everything has been going great with holidays, something changes whenever you get married.
Yeah,
and so there are stresses around holidays. When you have children, it adds to the chaos. And so we want to talk about how to approach stresses that come from life around the holiday season as a married couple, so that you don't spend your whole holiday season fighting at each other's throats, dreading family functions. And so there is a good way that you can go into the holiday season as a married couple. And so before we launch into holiday stresses, some of the topics that we're going to talk about today fall under just the umbrella of marital stresses in general. In fact, you looked up some statistics on the top factors that lead to divorce in marriage. So what are some of them?
Well, do you want to hit number one first?
Yeah.
Number one, you will be surprised by this.
This is the top.
Yeah, this is the top one. At 43% of married couples reported this being one of the number one reason why there's stress or divorce is a lack of family support.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy? Because it used to be along the lines, which I think you could tie it into it, but it used to be aspects of communication and finances. But what we see here is the number one thing is family support. And this time of year, really holidays more than anything can bring a lot of stress on couples, especially couples that are newlyweds.
Yeah.
Because you have two people that have just come together to create a new family, and now they're being pulled by their families, and it creates a lot of tension many times within that new couple's home. That can really be a recipe for disaster.
Yes, for sure. I remember being a newlywed and
Yes.
some of the stresses that it brings, because you truly there's this tension between wanting to make everyone happy and still being happy yourself, and creating new traditions within your home, and really identifying that leave and cleave, that family unit that you have, while still blending with the two other families. And so, having the conversations going into the holidays surrounding family is just a really good idea. If you're in the heat of it and you're in the moment and you're like, your mom's mad at us, what are we going to do? Things just end up in fights and division. But having that discussion ahead of time to establish boundaries within the family is so important. So maybe you're in that situation, you're newly married, maybe you are navigating the holidays anew with your spouse. Maybe it's just been chaos for years and you're like, I am not doing this again. Taking time to say, what are the boundaries? What are the things that we would say are non-compromises to us? What's important to us as a couple? And then how does everyone else fit in?
Yeah, I think maybe some practical, tools we could give people today. One of them, I think it starts with the basic understanding, because many times I think that families in general have a misconception of is when you and I became married, we started our own family, and then our families that we had are extended now. They're part of the extended family, but you and I created our new family. And so, I think that there's always got to be a healthy level of communication, because what many times can happen is to your point, both families are pulling at the new family, thinking, taking, and it's always done out of love. We love you, we want you to be here. But what many times can happen is it can end in tension, because those now extended families feel that they should just be there when they want them to be there. But in reality, they're their own unit. They're their own family. And they've got to start to navigate it with that perspective that these are my extended families now. And we have to do what's best for our family. And you run the risk of offending families.
Yes. And I remember you having that discussion with our son, because we were on the other end of that. We got married young, and everyone was expecting things from us that were just not really practical. We couldn't be two places at one time. And even though everyone loved us and we loved them. So I remember you having this discussion with our son saying, son, once you get married, your wife is your number one priority. And as much as you love us, as much as she loves her family, everyone else comes second to that new unit that you have together.
Yeah, she's first. She takes precedent over your mother and I, and what is your family that you've grown up with. It now becomes your extended family.
Well, but that comes easier when you've established the correct values.
It's so true.
Our son and our daughter-in-law both value family, so it was easy to go into that conversation because we knew that family was a priority to them. It wasn't like, okay, well then see you next year. It was that if anything, they would err on the side of trying to please both families.
For sure, and like I said, I think the point is everybody loves. That's why they want to be together. But what they lose sight of is like that now is their spouse. And secondary, it's your son or daughter. So you, as you pointed out earlier, that whether it's your son or daughter, they have to now begin to process and make decisions based off what is best for them and their family unit. And that comes many times at the cost of misunderstanding. Yes. I mean, let's be honest. There's no perfect families. There have been moments over the years, especially when we were first, where we had disappointed both of our families because we couldn't be at this or we couldn't be at that. And, for the most part, everybody is gracious in that. The hardest part is when you have, in-laws or family that, they act crazy about it.
Yes, and passive aggressiveness we talked about,
and that's where you put boundaries.
Yes. Yeah. And especially if it's your first time being the newlywed, or maybe you're on the flip side, you're where we are and you're releasing for the first time. Maybe you have adult children and this is a new holiday season to you. Understanding that there are reestablishing of boundaries that are going to take place, and to have grace in that, to have mercy in that, not to put pressure. What I found is the more I tried to hold on or hold tight to something, the more that they would push away. So me as a mother, having faith that I've invested the right values, that they know that I love them, and to choose love over anything that I want personally. Love is still the motivating factor of every relationship. So if I put my love for my family, meaning my daughter-in-law and my son, over even my selfish desires, then I start to compromise. And the things that were such a big deal and could have been potential arguments or fights aren't really that big of a deal at all because of my love for them.
That's so good.
And so it's being adult about it too on both sides. Unfortunately, as mothers, sometimes we can be immature about things and say, no, that's mine, But whenever you have the view of love and you say, you know what? That's fine. Like if we have to compromise, if we feel like things are going maybe too much in one direction and we feel slighted, well, let's have a conversation about that. How can that look differently? But everything from a motivation of love, not manipulation, not passive aggressiveness, all of the things that are poor forms of communication that end up bleeding into the tension around families during the holiday season.
Yeah. And I think, you nailed it. If love is the motivating force, which it is, you love your family, and that's why you want to be with them. But I think when we keep love as the center focus and we're sowing love, that what you sow is going to be reaped. And to your point, you nailed it. When we look to control people because we love them, we're actually stepping out of love, and it creates damage in our relationship, because what we feel is we can manipulate people to do what we want them to do. And it's really selfish.
Yeah.
And you might say, well, I love my son or I love my daughter. But let me just tell you, like, you're selfish.
Yeah.
Love is something that you have to be willing at times to let go of your preference, of what you want, in order to see that new couple take on their own family unit and be a family. So let's just give them a practical example. Like, obviously we walk through all this, we can kind of play with it. But, if we got calls, from our families and they both were like, hey, we want to see you on Christmas. One wants to see us at 12, one wants to see us at 2, and they're both having dinner at 12 and 2. How would we navigate that? Because I think there's a lot of scenarios where people are in that.
Yeah, stuck.
And then they're being demanded. And they don't have, let's just be honest, they don't have a maturity level within their parents or their families where they can kind of see in what we're saying.
Yeah. I think first of all, and we'll get to that example, is within that example is establishing and having a conversation of what are your values. Your values are to stay in unity and love with each other. And so if I know, first of all, it's super important to him to go to his side of the family, and I want to go to his side of the family. And that comes into the vision that you have for your family. You're sowing seeds whether that you know it or not. So it would be really easy to say, you know what, you just go ahead and go to your mom's, and I'll go ahead and go to my mom's, and we'll meet up at some point in the day.
Which
she's
we
getting
never
to visit
would
with you.
do that.
And so from the start, we said that is not an option. Talking about the vision for your marriage, that's never going to be an option. We're always going to travel as a family unit. And
because we're a family.
Right.
So if we're going to go to either family, this family is going to go see that extended family.
That's right.
We're not going to play a game where you only see your side of the family and I only see mine. And then, it's just a very unhealthy approach.
Very unhealthy.
Because what you're saying is that's still only your family and this is still only my family.
And it speaks something to
we're a family unit. The families outside of us are now extended family, and they come secondary to this family here.
So it's establishing that vision first and foremost. That's not an option. And then it's saying, okay, well, what do I want to sow long term into my family? There are decisions that you're going to have to make. Maybe right now as a married couple, you're not at the place where you're having children, but what are you establishing now? It was always very important to me that our children saw both sides of the family, and that they saw me having a good attitude towards my in-laws, and that they saw their dad having a good attitude towards my side of the family. Now, you might in the moment say, if we're fighting about your mom or my mom or your dad or my dad, it doesn't really matter. Well, it does. They're watching. And out of fear of God, first of all, and knowing that I'm going to reap what I sow, I always want to sow honor towards my husband's side of the family, and I always expect him to sow honor towards mine. That doesn't mean things are always perfect, but it's always done in a level of love and honor, because I don't want to reap something bad. Yeah. I don't want one day my kids to call and be like, you know what, we're not coming to your house today. You're just going to have to deal with it. We're going to their side. No, I want to share so that our children share time with us. And so you're sowing the right seeds to reap the right results. And that comes from discussions on vision and unity about your family unit. What do we see our family looking like long term? Making sure that we're sowing the right seeds to see that happen, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's being in a place that you have to compromise a little bit. So back to your question is, if one family is starting at 12 o'clock, the other's at 2 o'clock, and they expect you to be there in maybe there's like a half an hour travel time, and we're assuming that you're living in the same area. Yeah. What you could do is have a conversation of how could we spend the most time with each side of the family. And that might mean, hey, you know what, we're going to go and we're going to take some pastries and go to your mom's at 10 o'clock and have a little bit more time there. So if we have to leave at 1, they don't feel slighted. Yeah. Or we're going to...
One of the things that we do in that is I would take the lead role in communicating that to my family. And so if we are going to adjust our time schedule, then I'm going to take the lead to communicate to my family, hey, we know you're having dinner at 12. See, here's what I find too. Communication is everything, because communication sets the expectation that your families will have. When I'm communicating clearly, I'm going to be showing up at 10 because, just so you know, we have to leave at 1:30. I know we're having dinner at 12, but we have to leave at 1:30. We really want to spend time with you guys, and we'll be showing up earlier because we have to leave earlier than what we'd like to because we have another dinner to go to the other side of the family.
And I love what you said, that you communicate that to your family. That way it's not me being the bad guy or you being the bad guy.
It's just awkward too,
Yes.
and that way, if there is going to be something said like, oh, I'm so disappointed, people are going to have like natural responses. And when it's your side of the family kind of having a moment with you already know them. And you're like, okay, we'll work through that. And they work it out.
And you can
sometimes
filter
people
and
just need a
protect
minute.
your spouse from that too. If your mom were like, and she doesn't say this, but if she were like, oh, I really am looking forward to that. I don't really like that. You could be like, Mom, it's going to be fine. We're going to work it out. We're sharing. And you never have to come back and tell me that. You can protect me from that.
I wouldn't even say anything. Everything's covered. Everything's taken care of. And then vice versa. If there's on the other side, you might communicate. Maybe it was an adjustment where, hey, we're not going to be there till 2:30, and this is why, because we're going to spend most of our time. So I think that communication does set expectation when it comes to families, and the roles should be taken in regards to their own family. Mm-hmm. So you should be communicating to your side. I'll communicate to mine. Where the breakdown and frustration many times comes is there's nothing communicated at all.
Yeah.
So they get there, they're all enjoying it, and then they're like, hey, we got to go. And everybody's like, what do you mean you got to go? Like, it just, And then there's no communication, and everybody's surprised. Now everybody's kind of like frustrated, and why can't they spend time with us? And so it's just that person, whoever side of the family, they need to take the role and responsibility to set the expectation of what that day is going to look like, so that family has time to process that.
Yeah.
Like, I'm all right with not seeing them all day because I'm used to seeing them all day.
Yeah. And if they have a problem with it, letting that be their problem. That's not your issue.
That's good.
And as a family unit, being like, they're going to have to work through that if it's a follow-up conversation. But that's not an issue between us, and it's not an issue between us and them. That's a personal issue that they need to grow through. Yeah. And that's part of setting boundaries, and that's okay. And, another element that comes with lack of communication is now, if we haven't communicated to either of our families, or maybe it was poor communication, then there's a fight between you and I.
Yeah.
And then we go into that atmosphere not being present in the moment, carrying baggage. And so what could be a fun couple hours with our families becomes sabotaged.
It's true.
Because we're already going in there with a heap of tension between us that is now being felt by everyone in the room, and they could be thinking that it's against them and that it's not a good visit. So you're present, but you're not present. So I would say wherever you are, be there. Be there, commit to be there with a good attitude, be happy, even if you know that maybe you would rather be with your family. Steward your heart in a place where I'm going to enjoy this moment because I expect my spouse to do the same when we're with my family. It's not fair if one of the parties shuts off completely when they're with the other's family because of the stresses of the holidays. It's just not fair.
And everybody in
the
room feels that.
Yes.
And that's not fair to everybody. Everybody, let's be honest, you know everyone enough, and they know you enough that if someone's sitting in the same room, even if they're newly married, 99% of the time, if someone in the room has an issue, the whole family can feel it.
It's a vibe.
And so, don't pretend. Yeah, it's a vibe. Don't pretend like nobody knows or they're not going to discover. Like, if you got an attitude, you need to adjust that, because not only is that creating disunity between you and your spouse, but it's now creating disunity in your extended family.
Yes. And how fair is it for you, with your bad attitude, whether you mean to or not, to ruin the whole feel of the holiday for your extended family? And we speak from experience. Sometimes that's happened to us, or we've been in situations like that before. Sure. So make sure that wherever you are, you're fully present and engaging, being kind, sweet, no matter what other vibes are being communicated to you. Just operate from that place of love. Don't let an immature family member make you respond in a way that now you have to go back and apologize, or that you are fighting with your spouse all the way home. Stay in that place of love and grace.
Well, and I think sometimes even like this one-liner can begin to set the tone for your families. And that's, let's just say it's me. Joey and I, we're going to talk that over. And her and I are going to be on the same page, and we'll let you know what we're going to be able to do. Mm-hmm. What I'm communicating is, we're a family. We have to talk. We will make decisions together, and we will let you know. So just even something like as small as that, that's communicating back to the family that we have unity, we're a family unit, and we're going to be in unity, and we're going to let you know our decision.
Yes.
And so that should be done on both sides, and that there's opportunities for that many times, because you always have that family member that's going to spout off and let you know how they really feel about it. And that's when you just simply respond, well, I hear what you're saying, and my spouse and I are going to talk about that, and we'll let you know what we decide. Yeah. What you've just made is you've put boundaries up, you communicated we're a family unit, you've communicated also that you care. Mm-hmm. So that's just a great one-liner to help diffuse that and not allow disunity to come between them. Yeah. And I think sometimes that internal conversation, what's best for us, honey? Let's talk about that for a minute. We would love both of our families, but let's talk about what's going to be the best approach for that.
Yeah.
And then kids is a whole nother thing. When you start having kids, that's a whole nother discussion. But then you really have to start even more structuring, because you can only eat so many meals in one day. So
we try to eat a lot.
Yeah, but I mean, like sometimes families have all right, both grandparents now have food, and then the parents have meals, and there's 4 meals on this side of the family, and there's 3 meals on that side, and you're just like, guys, we can't eat all day.
And that comes from discussions and having discussions around how can we reorganize things. Maybe it's a different day altogether that you celebrate. Sure. It's not about not being stubborn or so set in your ways that you're not willing to be flexible.
Rotating, hey, we're going to do this, and for Thanksgiving, we're going to do that for Christmas.
Whatever it is, as we talk about holiday stresses in your marriage, one of them being family today that we're discussing, I would just admonish you in this, make the right investments. Take the time to have the difficult conversations. Family is so, so important, and it is a gift.
It is.
It's a gift. For years, we would bounce back and forth between families, and my mother passed away, several years ago now, but you just never know the time that you have. So not that you live in fear, but you always weigh that out with, okay, am I going to allow my immaturity rob me of something that's so special? And the answer is no. There's nothing that should rob you of that time away from your family, and there's nothing that should rob you of the enjoyment of the holiday or of the unity that you have between you and your spouse. So creating boundaries, having difficult conversations, setting the unity and vision for what you expect the holiday season to be like. They're all ways that you can be set up for success as you dive into the holiday season, and family doesn't have to be a huge stress.
Yeah, so hopefully those are some helpful tips on how to invest in family and really to have healthy family, healthy relationships, because at the end of the day, that's what everyone really wants anyway.
Yes, so we pray that you have an amazing holiday season with your family, that there's very little stress and lots of love and a lot of fun. Well, I'll talk to you soon on the Joie Miller Podcast. Thanks for tuning in.